Tom and I are kind of traveling brothers in this movement, and we complement each other just beautifully. Tom is from Viterbo. He runs the master's program in servant leadership. I don't know of any other master's program in the country. In servant leadership, there are now certificate programs coming up trying to supplement or meet people's needs and time constraints. And Tom, in fact, with the Chamber of Commerce has such a thing. With that, our theme is really about this statement. You've got all of these things in writing for the most part, note pages, so you can take notes on your thoughts. The elections that are going on would be a good reflection for us as to what's going on in the country. At the conclusion of the next meeting, I'm going to give you some reason to reflect on that. But do those served grow as persons? Do they, while being served, become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous? Wow, who wouldn't want to work for a boss or a company that includes that in the way they manage? What is the effect on the least privileged in society? Will they benefit, or at least will they not be further deprived? And underlying the confusion and the elective process that's going on right now, that last statement says about 50% of the people in the country who have not made more in the last 20 years than they were making 20 years ago. And half of that group has actually had a decrease in wages, and people are frustrated. All the people that are affected by Wall Street, we'll go to that at my concluding remarks. Reflect on that. What would you do if you were in that quartile? This is a Greenleaf statement. Actually, this came out just a few weeks ago, Monday mornings, the Greenleaf Center. As these statements, they come out, they pull out of the works and writings of Greenleaf. Greenleaf was just an academic person. Tom, you might give a background. Maybe I'll learn something.
Well, Robert Greenleaf was born in Terre Haute, Indiana. I just kind of like that. Terre Haute literally means higher ground. Wonderful if all leaders lived in higher ground. And his father was a plumber. I think what's interesting to note when we talk about leadership, everything that we learned about leadership, we learned at our dining room table. Everything that we learned about leadership, we learned growing up. We carried through our character is formed very early in our life, and we become who we always were. We develop new traits and skills in terms of the work that we do, we adapt. But that early formation, so the early formation in Greenleaf's life, his father was a plumber. And then became kind of a pipe fitter, and then became a manager. And when somebody would break down at the plant, he would bring his son in. And people would say, and they'd expect him to fix it, and all he started doing was started asking questions, diagnostic. Well, what did it smell like? Was there a change in smell? Was there a change in temperature? Did you hear anything differently than had taken place previously? Why was he doing this? Because the next time those same characteristics would come about, people would be able to fix it themselves. So Robert learned a great deal from his father just by asking questions of other people in a very respectful way, teaching them how to do the work. One time they came in and engineers put in this turbine in the power plant and it wasn't working. And they called in Greenleaf, who was not an engineer, and he just walked around the building for about 2 hours looking at everything and thinking. And they came back and he said, put it in backwards. Just his powers of observation. And so very early on, his son understood that if you're going to lead, if you're going to serve other people, you have to pay attention to what's taking place. And so he kind of developed that. He went on to get a degree, a 2-year degree in Terre Haute, Indiana, in engineering, and then he goes to St. Olaf University, Northfield, after that. So he's always looking for knowledge that was very practical, and yet had a broader sense of whole sight. And one of the things that happened in his second semester of his senior year, a professor said, I think it would serve you and the country well if you would take up residence in a large corporation and make sure that that corporation serves the greater good. He He said, we're moving from small towns to larger cities. We're moving from small businesses to large corporations. Corporations need to serve the common good. And so Greenleaf, his first job was in the AT&T Corporation. And that's where he began to serve. So he begins digging post holes. Now what's really interesting is this. For young guys, when you're out in the field, how do old guys treat you? Not very well. Why? They want to see what you're made out of. Well, Greenleaf had grown up around pipe fitters. So he was able to do the work and earn the respect of his peers, and then he becomes the bookkeeper because he had a college degree. Now this is a wonderful story. One time when he's giving out payroll, he gives out $40, too much. $20 that two guys got, and he can't find his mistake, and he's sitting in their payroll office, and he's just kind of worried, and this large man from the lineman comes out and says, what's wrong, kid? He said, well, I paid out $40, I'm probably going to lose my job. And the guy said, stop feeling sorry for yourself, get back to work. And at noon, the guy comes in, he's got two guys by the shoulders, and he says, give the kid the $20 bit. Greenleaf said this, I never found the same level of camaraderie in the corporate boardroom as I found out in the field. He was always impressed by the relationships of people who are willing to serve and be committed to the common good. And so this early life, and this is what's really important, as we talk to a group of people now, we're all pretty much in senior leadership roles. The most significant characteristic in the life of a young professional is their first supervisor. The way in which you continue to help people shape their careers as they begin. Because what happens if you pick up bad habits? Very difficult to change. So Greenleaf always understood this. All of leadership development is character development. All of leadership development is character development. That's why it's not unusual to find Dick Pieper spending 50% of his time in servant leadership, 50% of his time in character education. They're the same thing. But we're always in terms about developing character. Now, here's some of my learnings since my last time out. I'm speaking to a group of farmers, 200 farmers, and these guys all come in and they got their shirts rolled up to their sleeves. I mean, these are big guys, hardworking men. And I said, how can I serve you? And one guy says, teach me to be gentler and kinder. Another guy says, I'll second that. Another guy says, I'll give you a third on that. Teach me to be gentle. What are they asking? I said, we were kind of raised old school, weren't we? My way or the highway. How's that working for you now? When you say my way or the highway, what are young people choosing? How does it feel to watch a good young talent walk out the door? None of us can afford that. So what is it that when we talk about workers today, what are they looking for? A place where I can be freer, wiser, more autonomous, more like myself, and learn how to serve. So there's a movement that's taking place, and we need to take really careful look at this, because look at the changeover that's going to take place in the workplace in the next 5 years in terms of our leadership. How are we preparing that next generation of people for leaders? Are we preparing them to be servants and carry on the legacy of the corporations and institutions that we've helped to build?
These are the tenets of servant leadership. And we study these at this session. In this session, we're talking about community. And what about community? Building community examples. I'll give you a couple. The lack of diversity, the lack of inclusiveness, dysfunctional society. There's a lot of people. I had somebody sitting on the plane next to me. He just thought, he was from Illinois. More understandable. But he thought the whole society was just going to muck. I had a Facebook thing somebody put on, and it was about, the whole thing is a muck. I'm not even going to repeat the statement. I responded to it. I said, well, have you got a solution? What are you doing about it? What have you taken charge of? What's your proposed plan? No, I was just tearing things down. And that's always been there, but it seems like it's at a higher level of intensity. We rank 30th in this country, 30th, lower 30 percentile in the distribution of wealth. 70% of the nations have better distribution of their wealth than we have. That doesn't sound like America, does it? But it is a reason why we are seeing all the rhetoric on the news media. There's a very interesting analogy here in the police operations, complements what Tom just said. What do you see when you got really a riot scene? What do you see out in the police? Not always, but typically. They have small tanks, gear all over the place. And you got this guy he has no gear, he has no way of defending himself. The idea is command and control. Take away, all their ability of authority and control the situation. That's one way of thinking. How do people feel when they go through that? Not so good, usually. I've been in a situation where I was intimidated, horribly. I won't go into the details of it. By that kind of a function, command and control. Then there's another kind, and that is community policing. You've heard these terms. And in those communities, they have a whole different operation. Whole different operation. I think it was Buffalo had a catastrophe in their town, like many of the major cities had. But they had nothing happened after that. They had already talked, I think I got the wrong city. One of the cities out east, Philadelphia, it wasn't Philadelphia, excuse me. But that city had the same disruption as other cities who created riots and burning buildings, and they had nothing because they had community relations. There's something called, started in Canada by the mounted police in an area that everybody had drug problems and alcohol problems. And they weren't getting anywhere. Every night it was chaos. It's called positive tickets. Can you imagine in our city, if the policemen were going down the street giving out tickets for what everybody was doing correctly? That's what they do. That's the beginning of it. They completely change their community. Positive tickets. You can find it on the internet. So the idea in a military operation is that you have zero authority. You give the opposition zero authority. Increasing the other person's authority down to nothing, exposing their vulnerability. And you're always seeking in a battle to do that. How can I increase my authority? How can I increase their vulnerability? And that's command and control in the police operation versus community. Middle East, you can build an easy case for that, but that's much more complicated. That's about community, building community. Will we do it with command and control? Will you build a long-lasting company with command and control? As Tom just said, my way or the highway. Tom, you have any examples of that? And let's have some questions in this regard as well.
How many of you have bought a ticket to a benefit in the last couple of years? Somebody suffering from cancer, somebody's house burned down. How many people here just bought a benefit ticket? Is it only the person, Steve, who we buy the benefit for that benefits from that?
Definitely not.
No, the whole community comes together. Benefit comes from two Latin words. Bene facere means to do well together. And so when we come together in a community for the common good, to do well together, all of us benefit. And that's what real leadership is. And I think that's what Dick is pointing to. Leadership is inviting people from different backgrounds together for a common good. If you're only talking to the people that agree with you, that's a fraternity or sorority. Leadership is calling people from different backgrounds together for a greater good because it benefits everyone. Give you a couple examples from the lacrosse community. We have a community Thanksgiving dinner that serves 5,000 people on Thanksgiving Day. People are living by themselves, people without the means for a meal, people who are visiting. 5,000 people come to our lacrosse center on Thanksgiving Day for our community Thanksgiving dinner. It began in a small church. First year it's 200 people. It built 5,000 people now come. Last September they announced that they don't have enough volunteers and the possibility that they're going to have to stop it. Within 3 days, all their volunteer lists filled up. People in the community said, this is part of who we are. We can't let this go. And again, 5,000 people are served on Thanksgiving Day. Also, in terms of our Rotary Club, one of the things that happens is that informal groups build a democracy because they're always building community. Our Rotary Club in La Crosse puts up 3 million lights in the park, starting right after Thanksgiving, takes down after January 1st. People from across the state drive through into this winter wonderland of lights. But in order to drive through, they ask for a donation of food or money. They collect enough food to fill every food pantry for the next 3 months. They couldn't stop it if they wanted to. Why? Because the community now begins to see this as an asset. And where does it come from? Serving the common good. It's all volunteers. How is it that we join in it? Now, what's very important about Robert Greenleaf, he said this, it's not only individuals that need to be servants. Institutions need to be servants. So when we start to think about it, how is it that our institutions are helping to build the common good? How is it that our institutions are serving as good neighbors? These become kind of the nuances, and this is what I think distinguishes servant leadership from other forms of leadership. One last little story of community and the common good. I have a nephew. He's 30 years of age. He's a basketball coach in La Crescent High School. Not a glamorous job, but he's always wanted to be, and he's got his own team. And his team's not very good. And his best player this last summer was having a hard time running up and down the court. And it was found out, he was diagnosed, he needs a lung and a heart transplant. The young boy comes from a single parent home. Things are tough. And here he is in Rochester hoping for a lung and heart transplant. This is to find their basketball team. The whole community is supporting this young man and his family, providing transportation for the mother. Now, this is what's really significant. They go and play basketball in town in southeastern Minnesota, and every place they play, the athletic club, the parent-teacher organization, the boosters are making collections and taking the proceeds from what they sold that night and giving them cash donations to give to this family. To build up the community. Competitors, to be sure. Friends, most certain. So we have this capacity, and this is what makes our communities livable. And the possibility now in terms of growing community is really extraordinary.
Excellent, Tom. I will give you an example right here. The Wisconsin Servant Leader Cities movement has 5 cities, each of which have their own groups and they're active, all connected together, serving each other, synergy. Each have a different approach to their cities. Tom and I have similar but also different. Each of these cities has a committee, all volunteer, no 501c3, no checkbook. When I went to college, I went to engineering school because I wanted a technical background. But I really wanted to specialize in how to lead people on a volunteer basis. I figured if you could do it on a volunteer basis, it'd be no trouble when you pay them. Well, what I found out is there's no difference. If you want motivated people, you have to respect where they are. You have to listen. You have to listen. Just like Greenleaf with the boiler, he sat there and just listened, and he said, I think it's running backwards. Must have been stressing and straining and huffing and puffing. And he said, that's not the way it's supposed to sound. He was listening. So these are, you've seen this many times, but it works very well. Uses personal power and intimidation to leverage what he or she wants. That's the command and control approach. Servant leadership uses personal trust and respect to build bridges and do what's the best for the whole. Now, there's a long list there. We have permission to use that. We're going to take a break now. Thank you for coming. There's a lot to learn here. And the biggest part of this meeting is the peer groups, these tables. Ultimately, that's the main focus of the meeting. The resources are here to just feed you, and then you take that information and exchange it with like-minded people. That's the reason all of this Wisconsin movement began. We have 2,000 people here in Wisconsin in this area, all of which are interested. Anyone can click off any day. Anybody can refer it to somebody else. That's how it works. We have 62 videos. Everything that we do in Milwaukee, we're videoing, put it in clips, interesting anecdotes. So with that, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to start the next session. Yeah, we're in great shape. Thank you.